Hello and welcome along to the Property Academy podcast by Opus Partners. I'm your host, Stephen Knight.
And I'm Andrew Nicol.
And today on the show, we're talking about first home buyers versus investors. Are investors really holding first home buyers back? And I think this is one of the comments that we often hear, that investors are buying up all of the homes and stopping first home buyers from getting their first foot on the ladder. We're going to dive into the data to see if that's true. But Andrew, when I was thinking about this episode, it made me remember many years ago, Tom Sainsbury, great New Zealand comedian, made this clip and posted it on social media. And I think this is how some first home buyers see us investors.
My favourite pastime at the moment is going to house auctions, and I tend to gravitate towards the houses that will attract first time buyers, young families, things like that. Watch the auction, see how it's all going. Right, you can see the glimmer of hope in these young couples' eyes as they do a final bid, and then I throw in an extra $500,000 and just dash their dreams, and I get a big kick out of that. I've got 15 residences now, just scattered around the country. I used to have rentees in most of them. They just got too much of a bother, and it's better just to leave the houses empty, and then what happens is that they just gain capital. They just have to sit there, and I can sell them a month later for an extra $1 million.
And I find it very funny. Not because it's not true. That's not how it exactly works.
What do you mean not exactly? Not at all.
Okay, that's not how it works. But I do find it quite humorous. So does this really happen? Is there a trade-off? And this was Graham discussing his success of the property market. Now, Andrew, if we look at who's buying the houses right now, which buyer group is most active?
So according to Tony Alexander, first home buyers, so agents are reporting that they're seeing more interest from investors right now, but they're remaining pretty cautious. So they might be ringing up and inquiring about a property, or they might be coming to open homes, but they're not the ones that are driving the market right now. And so a net 12% of agents see more first home buyers, according to Tony Alexander's report. But I guess the question is, does this show that there's a trade-off, so that, there's only a space in the market for one or the other?
Okay, and just before I get into the data, I've got some great stuff from Calvin Davidson at CoreLogic. Why do people sometimes make it seem like there is that trade-off between investors and first-home buyers?
Well, I think it's exactly like that clip said before. Like, often we feel like property investors are really greedy, and they're going out there and they're snatching up all the deals. They're buying all those properties that first-home buyers would have bought otherwise, or, they've got deep pockets, right? They've been an owner of a home or rental properties for a number of years. They've earned up a bunch of cash, and so now they're able to go and push the price up and cut property first home buyers out of the market altogether.
Now, I suppose the other thing is that investors, if I think about the sort of property or the price of property that I really want to buy, it's in that second quartile. So I'm not really interested in the cheapest 25% of properties, because they're probably very run down, going to have quite high maintenance costs. And anything in the top 50% of top 50% priced properties, I'm not really interested in either, because they tend to have lower yields.
Yeah.
So that second quartile is exactly what I'm interested in as an investor, but it's also what a lot of first home buyers are interested in.
Yeah. So if we're competing against each other, you've got these poor old first home buyers that have just saved up their deposit, and then you've got the investors who have got deep pockets that can go in there and push the price up and buy it.
So I called up Calvin Davidson, my buddy, a fellow economist over at CoreLogic, and he sent me this data. This is the number of homes purchased per quarter by investors and also by first home buyers. Now, obviously, Andrew, anybody listening to the audio version of the podcast can't see the graph. What do you notice about the number of properties that investors and first home buyers, what's the relationship between them?
So the one thing I would say is that it looks like the number of investors far outweigh first home buyers. So investors are buying a whole lot more properties than first home buyers. But then the other thing is that the way that the graph goes, basically the inclines and the declines follow each other.
Yeah, so when more investors are buying more properties, it's the same with first home buyers. They're buying more and more properties. The peaks and the troughs are almost exactly the same. And what this tells us, and when I ran my analysis, there is a very, very high correlation between first home buyers and investors. When first home buyers buy more houses, so do investors. When investors buy fewer properties, so do first home buyers reduce their purchases. And that tells you that they are more fluctuating with the market. When the market's good, everybody buys more properties. When the market is bad and confidence is low, everybody buys fewer properties. And so that kind of tells us that it's not so much a trade-off between investors and first home buyers, because both can be successful in the market. both can increase their number of purchases or decrease them if they don't think it's the right time to buy. So we're not seeing that in terms of the absolute number of properties purchased by first home buyers at the moment. You are right, Andrew, that over the last quarter, investors purchased about 6,400 properties, and first home buyers was about 4,700. So first home buyers don't buy the same percentage of houses, but I'm not seeing a trade-off here. But what's really interesting is that I've got this one set of data, and depending on how you calculate it, you can either make it look really good for investors and say, hey, investors aren't buying up all the houses and they're not stopping first home buyers from buying more properties, in which case you'd look at this graph. But I've also crunched the numbers in a way where if you were anti-property investor, you could say, well, yes, there is a difference. Investors are stopping first home buyers from purchasing. So I'm just trying to get across as well, depending on how you want to crunch the data, will give you the answer that you want to see, depending on where your biases lie. And if we actually look at the correlation, we see that over the long term, if first home buyers buy an extra 1,000 properties, investors buy an extra 1,300 properties. And again, that's because the market's going good. So for every one house a first home buyer buys, an investor buys 1.3 houses. That's the market trend, because first home buyers and investors tend to move in the same direction. So Andrew, if you were pro-property investor, which we tend to be on this show, how would you interpret this data?
So yes, investors are absolutely buying more than first home buyers, but it's just that it's a case of a rising tide rises all ships, right? When there are more buyers in the market, that is more first home buyers and more investors.
Yeah, that's correct. Now, if you were anti-property investor, you would then look at market share. So not the total number of houses purchased by investors or first home buyers, but you would look at what's the percentage makeup of the market. Now, if you're looking at market share, then you do get into that win-lose situation. An extra 1% of market share for first home buyers is 1 percentage point less of market share for investors. Now, if we actually take a look at the market share, you can actually see it's pretty stable. Over time, investors have made up somewhere between 35 to 40% of the market. First home buyers have increased their share since 2014. You know, they used to be around 17.5% of the market. More recently, they've been buying the most houses they ever have, Andrew. They've been up to about 26% of the market. But you actually see that the proportion of properties both investors and first home buyers have purchased are actually pretty consistent over time. However, there is a bit of a trend. So when we start looking it out, we do see that when first home buyers are purchasing a higher share of the homes, then fewer investors are purchasing homes in terms of market share. So if first home buyers are making up 25% of the market, perhaps investors are only making up 33% of the market. Whereas if first home buyers are making up 18% of the market, investors are making up 40% of the market. So that's where you do almost get into a one-for-one trade-off when it comes to market share, the percentage of properties purchased. And if I was anti-property investor, and I wanted to put this data out here, even though it kind of doesn't support what I'd really like to tell you, which is that if investors are 1% less of the market, first home buyers tend to be 1% more of the market. And so what we all have to decide is, what do we care about? Do we care about the percentage of properties purchased, or do we care about the total number? My personal view, and of course it's because I'm pro-property investor, is it's the total number of properties purchased that we really care about. So for instance, at the moment, in the last quarter, 4,700 first home buyers purchased their first home, and that made up about a quarter of the market. But if we look back to 2013, first home buyers actually made up a smaller percentage of the market. So what do you care about, the percentage, or do you care about the total number of people purchasing and moving into their first homes? I think the absolute number matters more than the market share number.
Yeah, I would have thought so. And I guess this, like you said before, comes down to how you want to spin the data. And this is how newspapers make their headlines, right? So if you want to be pro-landlord, you can say, well, look, a rising tide brings up all ships. And so if we've got more investors in the market, you've probably got more people buying their owner-occupied property as well. So who cares? Lots more people in their own home. What difference does it make if the investor pool is larger and they also are buying more properties? But if you want to go to the other side and say, well, I want to sell the story that first home buyers can't get into their home, then you focus on that market share and you say, oh, well, we've got a small percentage of the market share, so few people are able to as a percentage. And I think the message there is it's the same data, but you can spin it however you want, right?
And if we think about where this is going to go, so I said to my buddy Calvin Davidson, where do you think the market is going to go over the next couple of years? And he said, well, actually, as the market heats up, first home buyers have really been making the most of this quiet market. They've been buying the highest percentage of homes, making up the largest percentage of the market than they almost ever have, over a quarter of properties sold. And so that's been really good. But as the market starts to heat up again, what we'll see is that market share will come down. First home buyers will be making up a smaller percentage of the market, but their total number of purchases will likely start to increase again. So again, you'll have that contrasting data. If you want to look at the bad news story will be first home buyers purchasing a fewer percentage of homes. The good news story is that but actually more first home buyers are getting into their first homes. So I don't think that there is a trade-off between investors and first home buyers. I mean, some of this comes down to, do they want to be in the market or not? Are banks lending or not? I wouldn't pay as much attention to the market share number because that's a zero-sum game. If one buyer group gains a percentage of market share, that's got to be taken away from another buyer group. But if we look at the total number of homes, what do we really care about? How many families are purchasing their first homes? And what the data tends to show is that when more first home buyers purchase their first homes, investors are usually in the market at the same time. When investors withdraw from the market, so do first home buyers. So we're not seeing that trade-off in absolute numbers. Right, let's wrap it up there. But please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Really does help us get the message out to more people. And hey, if you're listening to the audio version of this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, you want to check out some of these graphs, just Google Opus Partners YouTube. It'll be the first thing that comes up. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We release new videos every Monday and Wednesday. Thanks for listening to the Property Academy podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Knight.
And I'm Andrew Nicol.
We're going to be back again tomorrow with even more daily strategies, tactics, and insights to help you get the most